Fired up? Wow, that really helps ease the weight in my heart. Actually, I'm terrified of being here. And I'm smiling because that's just me. But really, I'm terrified because when I searched up TEDx failure on YouTube, I saw so many great talks. So I watched them all last night, I watched them all last week, and I was wrecking my brains. I'm 19. I'm in my second semester of college. I don't know if I'm gonna be delayed or not. And I guess the biggest personality trait that I have is I am the first female Sanggu president. I don't know. When people ask me how my experience was studying in a newly co-educational school, much less holding a position in a school so much bigger than what I was ever used to, I'd put on a smile because that's Bea. And then I'd say, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I entered senior high knowing I would be part of a super minority. In my interview with my family, they tell me, are you okay with this? Because in our classrooms, it's going to be 10 women in a class of 30. I came from a school that was previously all girls. That was the reverse of what I was used to. And you're all studying here, so you should know how it would be. But during my time, being a woman and running for a position put incredible pressure on you to succeed. People started introducing me as the first female Sanggu president, which you guys are clapping, but it was terrifying. Every single time, you guys just saw the meeting de avance earlier of the new grade 11 students. During my meeting de avance, I would be shaking. I would be crying before of it because I was so scared. In a school that has historically been majority male, I felt like my personal failure would be the failure of any other future Sanggu president. My fear of failure led to extreme self-consciousness, and I tried my best not to show how paralyzed I felt by this fear. I would smile, and I really did enjoy saying hi to every single one of you. But in my head, any failure would affirm that I was an imposter. I didn't deserve to be where I was. And in retrospect and reviewing my life, I realized that that's quite dangerous because I never set the boundaries of what that failure means. I defined failure to be anything less than perfect. That's terrifying. And I keep saying it because that's how I felt last year. I think that it's a deeply human thing to feel. Your test anxiety prior to an important exam like DUPCAT or ASET, or how you can't control your nerves during a class debate, or just the fear of a failed relationship. What if they leave me? What if I don't get into the school that I want? Saan ako pupulutin? Saan ako pupunta kung hindi ako makagraduate? Those toe the line between scary and motivating. Because when you look through a lot of motivational talks, a lot of motivational pictures, they tell you to fail forward. They tell you to have a growth mindset. They tell you to feel motivated by the idea of a dream. But most times, that pushes you to care more about the end result. So much so that our energy is spent on trying to make everything perfect, trying to make everything as close to the ideal in our heads. Dangerous, of course, when we fail. Well, if you don't fail, congratulations. From the deepest corners of my heart, I am really happy for you. You went through the emotional roller coaster of human emotions, and you got through successfully. But after that college entrance test, you'll face so much more emotional roller coasters. That failure is inevitably in your future. Wow, that's very pessimistic. But that's real. Because even though I am only a few months into, post-senior high school life, I do feel that when you face that failure, the pain that comes after sometimes seems large enough to consume everything you know. When you use the fear of failure as fuel, which is often what we do when it is our motivation, it is inevitable that facing failure means an explosion. It's not fired up, it's burnt out. What if I had taken a completely different path that wouldn't lead me to where I am now? I think those are things that likely would go through the head of this person who's going through this. I've seen that failure crush my friends' hearts, and I felt it for myself. Spoiler alert, grade 11 Bea, who promised so many things in front of a student body, wasn't perfect. I made multiple costly, scary mistakes. And the paralysis I felt after cost me so many more opportunities to do better. That burden on my shoulder came crashing down on me this time last year, which I feel like is an interesting reflection. I felt like an utter and complete failure. If you told me that in a year I would be speaking in Cebu to a crowd that welcomed me very warmly, I would cry because that didn't seem like a possibility. I didn't know if I would live past that year. I failed an exam that cost me honors at graduation in the last semester of my high school life. Not accustomed to it. I felt like I was leaving the senior high with no impact in the community and was just extremely bummed by how I felt like I wasn't able to reach my ideals at the start of the year. The anxiety turned into sadness and hardened into anger on myself because it took a toll on my emotional and mental health too. Nevertheless, I was grateful for my friends, and I would like to tell you a story of how I overcame this, but in fact, it was just simply sitting outside of the dorms during my sadness, talking to my friends when I felt like my insecurities were confirmed. Talks overlooking Ateneo helped ease my pain. Having people acknowledge what we were able to do and affirm that we are in fact valid made the darkest times feel less scary. And it was a process, of course, of not just getting over my own personal failures, but also realizing that trying to forget and trying to move on from these failures shouldn't entail not remembering the hardships that I've had. Just because the reality that I faced and the reality that I lived was different from the life that I ended up being in, that doesn't mean that I won't have meaningful memories that are important to me. Just because I was less happy, just because I felt like I was on the brink of something I didn't want to do, doesn't mean that the relationships I had with friends were less legitimate. And while I'm not saying that you should just forget your failures and forget all that growth, in fact, what I'm saying is by realizing that life after failure can be meaningful, can be important, can be a step towards a more complete and better version of yourself, I think that's how you're able to grow from those failures. It's just been a year, and I don't think growth can fully come after 12 months because it's a process, oftentimes not linear. Sometimes you wouldn't know this, but I would burst into tears just thinking about how much I've failed. But during the times where it makes the weight less heavy, with friends, with sometimes strangers, sometimes acquaintances who tell me, well, thanks for being there. Just realizing that, oh, maybe we left a legacy because the current Sangu and the Sangus in the future are doing amazing. That's what makes my heart feel a little less heavy. That's what makes me feel like when anyone asks me, how must it feel to have studied in a co-ed school? Instead of just saying or ending it at saying, it's the hardest thing ever, I realize it's hard. But it taught me that failure, just because you will never know what an alternative world would look like, is necessary. Maybe in a different and a perfect world, I would have been the ideal female Sangu president, and I would have done everything. But I would never know that alternative. And that doesn't mean that it would be better. It just means it would be different. So I'm happy to live this uniquely different life of failure. Thanks.